Hey everyone, and welcome. So, have you ever wondered how an app can just instantly know what language you're speaking? It's one of those little bits of magic that powers our digital world. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that magic and see exactly how it works.
So let's put you in the driver's seat. Picture this. You've just launched your awesome new app, and it's getting users from all over the world. Suddenly, a message comes in. What language is it? How are you supposed to respond? This is a huge, fundamental problem for anyone building for a global audience.
And trust me, this isn't some rare, one-off issue. It is everywhere. You see it in all that user-generated content, you see it in support tickets, you see it in real-time chatbot messages, and of course, in product reviews. In every single one of these cases, you're getting raw text, and you have no idea what language it's in.
So that's the heart of it, right? The global language challenge. How do we solve this problem elegantly and at a massive scale? Well, the answer lies in a really powerful tool that was built for this exact purpose.
And here it is, the Azure AI Language Detection API. At its core, it's a super specialized tool that does one thing incredibly well. It looks at a chunk of text and tells you what language it's written in. But, and this is the cool part, it doesn't just guess. It gives you a score to tell you how sure it is.
Let's break down its mission. It's designed to identify the language of pretty much any text you can throw at it, whether that's a tiny phrase or a whole document. And most importantly, it gives you that confidence score, a number between 0 and 1. The closer you get to 1, the more certain the AI is that it got it right. So you might be wondering, how does this thing actually work? Well, the best way to think about it is to picture it as a kind of language detective. It's looking at all the little clues in the text to solve the mystery of where it came from. All right, let's see our detective in action with a simple case. On the left, we have our input. We send it a request with the phrase "Bonjour tout le monde." The API does its thing, and on the right, it gives us the response. And yup, it correctly identifies the language as French.
Now, in the response from that last example, the API sent back this number 1.0. That's the confidence score. It's the detective not just telling us what it found, but how sure it is. So, what does a perfect 1.0 actually mean?
A 1.0 is basically a slam dunk. It means the model has absolutely zero doubt. The phrase "Bonjour tout le monde" is so clearly and unambiguously French that the AI is 100% confident. This is the kind of result you get with clean, simple text.
Okay, so that was a nice, clean example. But we all know the real world is, well, it's messy. So let's see what happens when things get a little more complicated.
And this really gets to the heart of it, right? Real-world user content is often messy. People switch languages mid-sentence. What does our language detective do when that happens?
Okay, take a look at this. It's a perfect example of what a real support request might look like. It starts in English, then dives into a good chunk of Spanish, and finishes up with a question in French. So, what's the detective's verdict when it sees this linguistic blend?
And boom, here's the result. It comes back as Spanish. But look closely at that confidence score, 0.9375. It's really high, for sure, but it's not a perfect 1.0. So why is that? So here's the secret. The API is pretty practical. It just looks for the language that has the biggest footprint. In that example, the Spanish part was the longest, so it got tagged as the main language. That slightly lower score is the AI's way of saying, hey, I'm pretty sure this is Spanish, but I definitely see some other languages mixed in here too.
All right, so now we know how it handles a mix of languages. But what about when the message is just total nonsense?
Let's really test our language detective now. What if we give it something that's just gibberish? Maybe it's just a string of random characters, or there's some kind of encoding error. What happens when the analyzer just can't make sense of the input? And thankfully, it does exactly what you'd want it to do. It basically throws its hands up and says, I don't know. The language name comes back as unknown, and more importantly, the confidence score is a big fat 0. And this is so important. Instead of taking a wild guess and maybe getting it wrong, the API fails gracefully. It tells you straight up that it couldn't figure it out. That kind of transparency is what lets you build really solid, reliable applications. Okay, so we've been in the technical weeds for a bit. Let's zoom out and connect this all back to the big picture. Why does any of this actually matter? It really all comes down to this simple but powerful 3-step flow. First, you automatically identify a user's language. Second, that lets you give them the right response, maybe by routing them to a support agent who speaks their language. And third,
That whole capability is what lets you build truly global apps that feel local and personal to every single user.
And all of this leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. We started with just detecting language, but that's really just the beginning. As AI gets better and better at understanding the deep nuances of human language, you have to ask, what other communication barriers are going to be the next to come tumbling down?